you bring nutritional wellness awareness to people, right? But you're not a nutritionist. You're not a registered dietitian. You're happy to share that wealth of knowledge, but that's not your thing necessarily. Can you explain like why the energy part is so important and it's not just eat healthier, drink more water, like why that energy and identity piece of it is so key?
Oh yeah, it's a huge part. So you could have a perfect diet and still be depressed, I think, because there is a major element. I wouldn't say that it's all mindset or all nutrition that has to go hand in hand because we're whole beings. First, I want to describe what energy is. Energy is basically everything we are. It's our essence, but the building major building blocks of our energy come from our beliefs, our thoughts, and our feelings, because that's what's creating our actions, and that's energy as well. Money is energy, but money is like a byproduct of our energy. So it's all this integrated thing. And our thoughts and our feelings are creating our actions that are creating what we do and don't do. But the most important thoughts that there are, or part of our energy, are the most important element of our energy, I should say, is our beliefs and our thoughts about ourselves and who we are. So the belief you have about who you are. So, for example, if I think I'm a loser, or if I think I'm a has-been, or if I think I'm an unattractive middle-aged woman, like this asshole on my Instagram recently, he was like, "Oh, well, you're just giving hope to unattractive middle-aged women everywhere." I was like, "Wow, it's sad that you see the world that way." But
Wow.
if I think that about myself and I believe other people's perceptions of me, which many of us do, our concept of who we are comes from these reflections that we have gathered from other people. So maybe we were in fourth grade and we got rejected by our friends, or somebody in middle school told you that nobody likes you, and you don't know any better at that time. So you internalize that and it becomes part of who you are. If your sister always said that you're a terrible dancer or was always telling you to shut up, you might internalize that what you have to say isn't important. So you kind of create this concept of yourself, your self image, around these perceptions and reflections that you get from other people, because you don't know how to look within yourself to figure out who you really are and allow that to shine. Because we're just blank canvases when we come into this world. But I do think we do come into the world with a purpose as well. So that energy is the most important energy because it's like the well from which everything else springs. So if I think that I am above average, and this is not like in a narcissistic way, like I'm better than everybody else kind of way, but if you recognize your talents and you recognize what you're good at and what you love, and you just kind of let that light shine without dampening it, because a lot of people are very conditioned to dampen their own light and try to keep other people comfortable by not being too big or too fast or too loud or just too much, right? Especially as women, that's a big thing. And that's because they've internalized this belief about themselves that they're too big or too small or too loud or too much in general, or they're not enough, right? They have these kind of subconscious things playing in the background, when really that's guiding how they do things, what they do, and how they do it. So if you flip that and you're like, oh, well, none of that stuff's true. Who am I really? And you start digging into, we're all love. We're all love at our core. So if you come from a place of love, which sounds so hokey and corny, but if you come from a place of love, an intention of discovering wisdom, having new experiences, that sort of thing, it's all about your intention. It's all about your intention. And that's intention is energy too. So your intention to seek wisdom, seek new experiences. And we talk about beliefs a lot in the Transform Retreat. So it's not so much about identifying your false beliefs and like, where are my beliefs? What are my beliefs? It's about going out and having experiences that create beliefs that, for example, I had maybe a subconscious belief. There was definitely some little chatter in the background when my cousin invited me to go. And I was like, my higher self was like, yes, we want to do this, and there was no reason to say no to it other than my past experience, which the ego has this record of, oh yeah, when you went kayaking last time. But now I'm awake enough and I've healed enough to know that those past experiences with kayaking were with some dusty dudes and in a freezing climate where I was like uncomfortable, stuffed into a life jacket. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to try this. I'm not going to tell myself stories about the past that will because if I had said no, I'm not really a kayaking person because of that experience, those experiences, I would have missed out on falling in love with something that really lights me up. And I love being near the water. So getting into a kayak and just paddling leisurely, the way I like to hike is just walk leisurely through the woods. I'm not really a moderate or extreme thrill seeker when it comes to hiking. Thing with kayaking. It is what you make it. So who you are is who you make yourself. We get to choose who we are. We're the main character in our lives. We get to choose what it smells like. We get to choose what it looks like. We get to choose what it sounds like. What's your soundtrack of your life? What are you listening to on a daily basis? Are you listening to drama on TikTok? Which, who's not guilty of that from time to time, right? Had to turn off TikTok because I kept hearing videos about Blake Lively and that whole drama.
Yeah, same.
I just don't care. I like watching her movie. She's pretty, whatever. Like, I just, who other people are is irrelevant to me. It's because that's their business. It's not my business. It is kind of interesting though, because the celebrity world, you present a false identity oftentimes, and people think they know you from your movies, but then they get to know the real person. And they're like, oh, you're none of your characters. You're just a totally different character. And so that's kind of interesting with the identity piece. But yeah, if you're living in victim mode, and it is like this physical component too, because when you're living in victim mode or you're living in fighter mode, zone mode level, it's all kind of interchangeable. When you're a victim, when you're a fighter, when you're angry all the time, when you're feeling depressed and anxious all the time, your body is creating hormones, catabolic hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, that are like battery acid through your body that drain your body, and it literally makes you blind to other opportunities. I had somebody on my TikTok the other day who was like, well, it's easy for you to stay because you have a van and you have this and I don't have any of that, and I have no love, I have none of this. And I'm like, yeah, but you have a phone and you have a brain and you have yourself. People don't realize how valuable that is. You're not broke. Stop saying you're broke. Stop saying you're broke, because if you say you're broke, you're going to think like a broke person. You're going to do things a broke person does, and you are creating that. You are creating that. So if you're saying that I'm all these negative things because that's what your fear is, that's what your belief is, based on how you've chosen to interpret your past experiences, what you have made them mean, because nothing means anything until we give it meaning. So we might have something traumatic happen to us, and it could be something terrible. Somebody betrays you, you go through like a nasty divorce, or you get shoved into a mental hospital, like I did. And I did make that mean something that it didn't. And it could have been like, oh, well, these people didn't know any better. and there was a part of me who knew that. There was a part of me who knew that they were operating from fear and that they just didn't know what they didn't know. But the fighter in me was like, they need to know that they messed up. And you're never going to get apologies from people either, because they don't see it that way. If they're not awake and they're not doing the work and looking within themselves to figure out where they went wrong, you're gonna be waiting a long time for people to be like, yeah, we're so sorry, we didn't know what you're going through and we didn't see things from your perspective. Nobody's ever going to really be able to see things 100% from your perspective except you. So you have to be okay with living there and being your own best friend. And when it comes to mental health, physical health, your life, you have to be your own best friend. I like to ask clients, who's the most important person in your life? And it's kind of a trick question, because when somebody's stuck in the caregiver energy, for example, where they're in the catabolic zone or the catabolic zone of the caregiver energy, say that 5 times fast, they will take care of other people, but they won't take care of themselves, and they'll feel resentful that they're not getting back what they're putting in. And they'll be exhausted and they're just giving, but not to themselves. So they're not recharging themselves. And I like to ask them that question, because most of the times they'll be like, well, my kids or my husband. And I'm like, no, you have to be the most important person in your life. You have to be your own best friend, and nobody can be a better expert on you than you. So even though we've been trained, conditioned from birth to give our power away to doctors, therapists who know better, I find it easier to learn from people who've recovered from the things that I've dealt with, which many doctors haven't gone through the things that I've gone through. Many doctors haven't healed from the things that I've healed from. And I think those voices are important. And so, yeah, even though I'm not a nutritionist, or I refuse to go back to academia and to learn things, you don't need to learn things. You don't need to go to school to learn things anymore. That's such an archaic system.
Mm-hmm.
There's still sometimes people are like, well, how do you know? And I'm like, because I lived it and I've recovered from it. That's how I know. And it's also logic too. It's just logic. And I feel like there's a lot of logic that's been from medicine these days in the name of profits, where they'll get us to ignore the fact that what you put in your body affects how you feel, which is so obvious. It's so logical to say,
Yeah.
oh, well, there's something that you can't see, and there's something that we can't even show you. We can't prove that you have it, but there's a chemical imbalance in your brain. And it's just like, well, what's causing that? Probably the food you eat, probably the other chemicals that you're ingesting causing the chemical imbalance. Duh. It's just logic, but we're so far removed from that logic that people are drinking thinking it's healthy. People are smoking pot thinking it's healthy, not knowing what those chemicals are doing to offset the balance and the healing abilities that our bodies naturally have. And we've been trained to think doctors are smarter than us, that science is smarter than our bodies when our science doesn't know everything about our bodies yet. It just knows a tiny sliver of what our bodies are able to do. They only know 0.0001% about the brain, yet they're trying to treat the brain like experts. And you have this disease forever, you have this disorder forever, and you might be able to manage the symptoms, but it's irreversible. And so if you don't really know what's causing it, you don't know all the facts about it, how can you say there's no cure? Because there's a cure to everything. Just because you don't know what it is yet doesn't mean it's not real. So you're just outside of your bubble
Yeah.
of awareness. The things and then there's the things that you don't know, and then there's everything else outside of that. The answers exist there. The answers exist in one of those bubbles, and just because you don't know where it is doesn't mean it's not real.